All right, let's dive into something we've all experienced, the art of the argument. Today we're talking about a secret playbook, a masterclass on the unspoken and, let's be honest, often unfair rules of how you actually win. So let me ask you this. Have you ever been in a debate where you had all the facts, your logic was rock solid, you just knew you were right, and you still lost? You just walked away completely frustrated thinking, wait, what just happened?
Well, a 19th century philosopher named Arthur Schopenhauer had a brutally honest answer for you. He would say that in that moment, the argument totally stopped being about truth. For your opponent, it was never about who was right. It was simply about who was going to win. And that feeling, right there, is the heart of the matter. It's that maddening experience of being outmaneuvered by a clever trick, not a better argument. Schopenhauer was obsessed with figuring out exactly how this happens. See, Schopenhauer's diagnosis was that, deep down, our own vanity is the real problem. The second we state a position, we get attached to it. The debate isn't a search for truth anymore. It's a battle to defend our little piece of intellectual turf.
Now, to really get his solution, you have to understand his, let's call it cynical, but very clear-eyed view of people. He wasn't interested in how people should argue in some ideal world. No, he was all about documenting how they actually argue, out in the real world, warts and all. And he made this really crucial distinction. On one side, you have logic. The formal science of thought, the search for objective truth. It's something you could do all by yourself, with a pen and paper. But on the other side, there's dialectic, and that's the art of intellectual combat between two people.
So he took all his observations and compiled them into this essay called The Art of Controversy. And honestly, it reads less like a stuffy philosophy text and more like a gritty, practical field manual for how to win a fight.
He gave this practice a fancy name, Aristotle dialectic. But the key, the absolute game changer, is that little phrase at the end, whether one is in the right or the wrong. This was totally radical. Schopenhauer was basically saying, hey, let's get real. The goal of most arguments isn't truth, it's just winning, using whatever means you can.
His favorite analogy, and it's just perfect, was to call it intellectual fencing. Think about it. A fencing match isn't about discovering some universal truth about swords. It's about skill, it's about tactics, parries, thrusts. It's about winning the duel. And he said the exact same thing applies to a debate.
So how do you become a master fencer? Well, Schopenhauer didn't just stop at the theory. He meticulously identified and cataloged 38 distinct stratagems, or let's call them what they are, tricks that people use to win. He literally wrote the first ever complete playbook for verbal combat.
Okay, so now let's pull back the curtain and look at a few of these so-called dark arts. And I guarantee you are going to recognize these from political TV, social media, maybe even your own dinner table.
Let's start right at the beginning with his very first trick, the extension. This one is probably one of the most common and sneaky effective tricks in the whole book because it works by twisting your opponent's own words against them.
Okay, here's how it plays out. You make a specific, reasonable statement. Your opponent then grabs it and stretches it way beyond its natural limits, creating this huge, distorted version that's way easier to knock down. So if you say something like, the English are supreme in drama, they might fire back with, oh, so you're saying they're the best at everything on stage, even opera? They aren't fighting your actual point anymore. They're fighting the ridiculous straw man they just built.
Next up, here's a classic move for when you're on the ropes. Trick number 29, the diversion. This is pretty much the ultimate escape hatch when you know you're losing the argument based on facts and logic. The process is so simple and, as Schopenhauer pointed out, just incredibly bold. Step 1, you realize the argument is slipping away. Step 2, you suddenly pivot to something completely unrelated. Then, step 3, you go on the attack about this new thing. Suddenly, the original point is totally forgotten. You successfully derailed the whole conversation.
And this leads us to the final trick, number 38, the absolute last resort. When all logic has failed and defeat is staring you in the face, you make it personal. The infamous argumentum ad personam, or personal attack. You completely abandon the topic, what he calls the lost game, and you just start attacking the person you're arguing with. Suddenly it's about their character, their motives, their haircut, anything but the actual subject. It's a pure appeal to spite when your intellect has run out of road.
Now you might be sitting there thinking, okay, this is a manuscript from the 1800s. Why does any of this still matter?
Well, it matters because while our technology has changed, our basic human nature really hasn't. These tactics are absolutely everywhere.
I mean, just look around. From political sound bites that use the extension to social media feeds that are just filled with diversions and personal attacks, these stratagems are the engine of so much of our modern discourse. They are not historical relics, they're active tools people are using every single day.
And you know what? They still work for the exact same reasons Schopenhauer pointed out. They prey on our emotional reactions. They take advantage of our intellectual laziness. And most of all, they weaponize our vanity, that deep, primal desire not to look stupid in front of other people.
So what's the big takeaway here? Schopenhauer didn't write this so we could all become more dishonest debaters. He wrote it as a manual for self-defense, because the absolute best way to defend against these tactics is to know them. Once you can spot an extension or a diversion coming a mile away, you can name it, and you can steer the conversation back to what actually matters. Knowing the playbook is your ultimate defense.
This is for entertainment and educational purposes only.